Good evening and welcome to our October Ad Hoc Attendance Boundaries Committee meeting. We are happy to have you here. If you're online and you would like to say something, Rob will give you some instructions a little bit later on in the meeting, and we are going to take community comment in the beginning for like the first 6 minutes and then at the end, just so you all are aware. I am Kareem Moffitt, Chair of the Ad Hoc Attendance Boundary Committee. Am I right?
Carolyn Jones, committee member.
Board Member Bolton is on our way, but we are going to go around the room and then end with Rob, who is going to give you instructions if you are online and you'd like to say something within the first few minutes. Starting. Yes, sir. Is there a green light? Okay.
Tracy Linville, teacher at John P. Parker.
Donnie Williams.
Ms. Williams, Silverton, just speak in the mic real quick, y'all.
Donnie Williams, Silverton.
And we skipped one.
Ashley Garland, parent and teacher at John P. Parker School.
I Valentine, here LSDMC.
Shirley Hackett Austin, Silverton City Council.
Jeremy Gollihue, Chief Information Officer, Cincinnati Public Schools.
Michelle Piper. Carol Gibbs, Mount Auburn.
Parent, John P. Parker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Lindy. I'm the board president for Cincinnati Public Schools.
He just snuck in, guys. He was not here. We would have introduced him in the beginning. He was not here first. Welcome, Ben.
Coates, PRM parent, LSDMC rep, and Clark Montessori parent.
Can you just shout at Miss Phillips?
Phyllis Davis, the board's administrator.
Rob Wilson, technician. If you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public session at the end of the meeting, please click the hand icon at the bottom corner of your screen, and we will ask you your name and association of the district, and then assign you to be able to speak at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
So as I shared earlier, we are waiting on Board Member Bolton. So we're going to take our community comments. Everybody has roughly 2 minutes, but we are going to stop as soon as she gets in. So I just want you all to I'm not trying to be mean. I just want you all to know. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about some of the consensus items for our upcoming report that we have. We do have a tentative date. I think it's pretty solid, but I'm going to say 90% we should be reporting on the 4th of December. So we've got to get this done together. And so we're going to listen to the community. I'm going to set my timer now. When the timer goes off, guys, grandmas, listen, when the timer goes off, y'all got to stop talking.
No, I don't have anything to say tonight.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. She didn't brought the cavalry in here. She don't have anything to say. Okay, so who would like to go first? Make sure that you've signed into the attendance sheet.
Austin. I'm Shirley Hackett Austin. I'm on Silverton City Council. I, way back when, fought very hard to keep Silverton Elementary School in our community. And I just come down to hear and listen to see about the redistricting and hopefully maintaining that school in our community.
Yes, ma'am. Looks good. Anyone else? I know Ms. Garland wants to speak. Sure. Uh-oh, that means it's going to be big. Wait till the end. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I'm Dottie Williams, Silverton Council, and I too want to make sure our school is maintained and stays in Silverton.
I'm going to remind everybody that is listening and that is in here, there is no discussion about Silverton. It's not even a consideration. I know I didn't say that 100 times. I'm going to say it 101. I promise you, we're not trying to get rid of Silverton.
I wasn't gonna say anything. I'm Ellen Thompson, LSDMC chair, and I feel like I need to say something. I just want to thank you all for opening doors up to us to be a part of this. And I believe you that you're not purposely trying to close our school up, but the long and short of it is that it looks like it's not you that's doing it. It's the process that we're going through that might eliminate us. That's it.
I got you. I have absolutely no problem with you advocating for what you want. None at all. I think that's a healthy process. But I just want to tell you where my heart is. It's not that. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Can everybody hear me okay? Or do I need to
Yeah.
use the microphone?
Robert Schiffern.
Okay, can you hear me now? My name's Teresa Langford again. I'm a parent for the student at John P. Parker. And I would love to have the same assurance that Silverton just got, that John P. Parker would continue to stand as a pre-K through sixth grade school for the remainder of however long it's in existence. As I said the other night, my son is a student there, and we have found the safest place that we can find for him. The staff is amazing. Just the transition alone to move him from that school to another one, even for 1 year, would be tremendous. I mean, we're in almost the end of October, and we've just, at second grade, just finally started getting settled down with the routine of being at school on a daily basis. So switching up that routine at all for him and other kids like him would be just detrimental. So as a parent, that's why I'm here. I want to do and try to fight for what I feel like is the best option for my son.
Anyone else want to speak? Yes, sir.
Again,
You didn't
Tom
want to
Peter.
speak until everybody else was speaking, huh?
No, it's more just a question. Maybe I misunderstood, but this is you're a working committee, is that right? So one of the things when I read about in Madisonville that there was going to be another school built, in a lot of ways I was excited. My business borders Madisonville. We serve that community, and I'm always trying to understand the communities I serve, their demographics and their needs. So when I went to the first meeting, I went there assuming that there'd be a lot of data presented on the justification for the need for another school, because I follow demographics quite a bit. My previous career was in government and planning. And we haven't found those numbers. In fact, I hired a college professor to look at the census over the last 20 years, and there isn't significant household changes yet in that area. If anything, we've seen a younger population move in with fewer children. And so, and I don't see the trends when I look at the macro environment in the United States of birth rates. They've plummeted, frankly, and they've been going down, and COVID just made them worse. So I was just wondering, because I did go to the meeting, I did ask somebody in administration if they had any demographic data and trends, because I'd love to use it for my business. I do 20 and 30-year planning. And they said they didn't have any. So I would love to see it if you do have it, if we could share it, because one, it would help my business, and two, I'm a big volunteer in Parker, so I love to know how to help them as well. So if there is any trend analysis or demographic, particularly as it relates to families and children, if that can be made available and shown to the public, I would love to see that, because if it is happening, again, we're not showing it at all in our neighborhoods. Even every place around the sports club, which includes Hyde Park, all the other different areas, Fairfax, we're just not seeing the growth rate in families. It's mostly singles and couples and choosing, in many cases, not to have children. So.
Well, I will certainly, I wrote that down and I'm gonna make that request to the administration to be able to provide that. I wasn't aware that it wasn't provided at the community meeting, but maybe maybe that's something that can be shared with the community. And that's something that administration would have. So I wrote that down, trend analysis to justify another school in Madisonville. That sound about right? Okay. Internet community meeting. Anyone else? Oh, yes, sir.
Not just but I just love to see what the numbers are, because again, selfishly for my business, but also I think it would help Parker Elementary and all those other ones to be able to accommodate the demand if they're showing the demand. I'm not showing it. My consultants haven't shown it, so that's why I'm asking.
Understand. Anyone else like to comment? Yes, sir. Say that one more time. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Board Member Bolton is here, so we are going to, this is going to be the last comment. So, 2 minutes. Traffic was the problem. We're here. Okay. 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 There's 2 minutes, Katie. Hello? Katie, go ahead with your comment. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Katie Ashton, and I am a parent of 2 children that go to Gamble Montessori Elementary, and I'm part of the LSDMC committee. I'm just here to represent us and continue the discussion on our Rising Star classrooms. I believe this was brought up at the last board meeting about when we first opened our Rising Star classrooms. There was a promise that there was a certain amount of time that these classrooms would be occupying the building, and that time has been expired. So we're just trying to get a better feeling about how much longer we will have these classrooms in our building, because there is such a high demand for Montessori classrooms. We're having to turn away children for preschool and kindergarten because we have classrooms that aren't even full of Rising Star students.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Katie, before you go.
Yes. Yes.
Board Member Jones has a question for you.
Is
Sure.
the clarification that's needed is what, and I'm trying to understand what you're saying, is that there is a Rising Star pre-K program that isn't at capacity. And the desire is to what, increase the capacity or not have to offer pre-K?
So our desire would be to consolidate the Rising Star classrooms to like 2 classrooms as opposed to 5. So we would be able to open up more Montessori classrooms due to the demand.
Thank you. That was helpful. I needed to
Thank you.
clarify that.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I appreciate it. Again, sorry for my tardiness. The issue at Gamble, I think part of the delay is we've gone through literally 3 administrations since that promise was made. So I think we have to kind of keep that in mind. The other thing is that's a problem in a number of our buildings where our Rising Star classrooms are inhibiting the growth of the primary function of those particular buildings. And I think Gamble is one of the first. I know Aiken is another, and there are a couple of others as well, as we still try to find enough space for the preschool piece. So since the Gamble folks have brought it, I know Aiken's brought it, and a couple of other schools too. It is a problem, and actually the larger problem is finding enough preschool space. So appreciate y'all sharing for as long as you have, and yeah, we need to know it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
I think that's actually something you brought up multiple times at ad hoc and probably in the general meeting as well, that the preschool spacing. There's no other questions on the floor. Rob, I did send you the link to the report just so you can put it online. I mean, no. You can, yes, because it's really just kind of a brain dump at the moment. Ms. Phyllis, you already have access to it. So we and I shared with the community that we really need to get our report done. So I want us to spend some time looking at that. The report will be on the screen so you all can kind of look at it. It's not accessible to you right at the moment because it's not finished. So it is not on Board Docs. It's just on, oh, it is on Board Docs? Oh. Well, I didn't want you to put it on Board Docs, Ms. Phyllis. It looks a mess.
It's a draft.
Yes. Does it say draft on there? Can we take that down, please? That was the intern. Now everybody knows how I think. You guys are gonna be, well, good. I'm glad you didn't see. Oh my goodness. Yes, well, we're gonna take that down. So if you're in the meeting, you get to see it. I did not know that. Miss Davis is on it. But what I do want to do is, since we have some time and we have Jeremy, we can kind of go through the historical perspective. If you all don't, and I am not sensitive, so we can tear it up, we can look at it. This is Dr. K's brain dump and how I think. But I started it off with the request and the charge from the board. This is, and I put links in there. So from the August 1st meeting, 2022, you don't have to go to those links, but that's the minutes. That is the minutes from the meeting where we got our charge. So that is the charge that was in the minutes that said that we were to work on elementary attendance boundaries. And that will be live in the regular report too. So if you want to be able, there's a bunch of different links in here. If you want to be able to go backwards, you can and reference. So I wanted to make sure everybody was good on that. And then I started it off with a historical perspective of where we have been. And I'm not going to read through all of this unless you all want me to, but I don't like that either. But it talks, we spent a significant amount of time, and what I mean by that is many months going back through history with Board Member Bolton and then also with Board Member Jones on how did CPS get to here. So I tried my best to summarize this. And it started from the facility, well, we started from the facilities master plan, but then we also have a historical perspective from legal counsel that talked about, I don't want to say segregation in the city, but that's kind of what it was. And the reasonings why we had to make some of the decisions that we made. Board Member Bolton was very good about sharing with us the reasoning why we kind of got rid of junior highs. If you all remember, we had like Mary Middle School, we had a bunch of different, we had Schwab, we had a bunch of different schools. Schroeder was exactly. And so I just summarized how we got here from all of our minutes to the meeting. Thoughts? As you peruse it, I put down the Meridian plan because that was kind of where we were. The strategic plan, the former strategic plan, talked about a Meridian plan and then how we got out of the Meridian plan thinking and into a corridor model thinking. Everyone? And there's a couple of places where we talk about the equity policy and how the district has evolved to have an equity policy in part because of the boundaries and how the boundaries were drawn needed to be, you can kind of summarize that for the people that need it, but there was the need for not to draw lines to dismantle segregation. I'm trying to say it politically correct, but yes. So Board Member Bolton gave us a very good historical perspective on that.
Can I add something?
Yes,
just at first glance, and this is, I'm just throwing a comment out there. I also think part of the historical context was the financial impact of transportation. And I don't know if that goes somewhere else, maybe in consensus points or whatever, but that was part. I see where you have the middle school, you have middle school transportation, but I think initially, and maybe Ms. Bolton can correct me if I'm wrong, the historical context included us doing an analysis of what it was costing us to transport kids all across the city.
Meaning years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
When it first started, when it was part of the Meridian plan,
Is that
Am I
right?
correct, Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and certainly post. Now, Metro's piece doesn't play into it as much as our yellow bus experience plays into it. But it is obvious that, and some people have asked, well, how did you go from attendance boundaries regarding an elementary and then you start to get into the high school piece? Well, part of that, in part, was us being able to argue, are we properly, efficiently using the capacities of our buildings, first and foremost? And second, are we growing where we need to grow, if indeed that's the case, or where are we kind of over capacity or under capacity? And then when you got to where our transportation line item this last year basically is $50 million, the idea of high schools of choice begins to be whether or not financially you can do it. But again, Metro kind of takes care of that to a certain extent, except for our 7th and 8th graders, because those have the option of yellow bus. But yes, the financial impact regarding transportation, the ability, and I think this is something that the treasurer has raised, is the staffing piece too, that if you don't have a certain number of kids in a building, it's very difficult to properly staff with a full program. And I think that was also part of it. So there are financial impacts of the way we've been doing, and it may be a luxury of what we once were doing. We cannot necessarily any further afford, let alone the idea of addressing capacity, overcapacity in high schools, overcapacity in preschool, undercapacity in some of our elementary systems. And so in preparation for what we probably eventually have to ask of the public, according to our administration, having done a large facilities review under Superintendent Wright, we probably somewhere in the next years or 2 or 3, we're going to go back to the public about facilities just because of the age of our buildings and what have you. We need to be able to prove to the community that we're effectively using the inventory that we've got. So finances, to Member Jones's point, is correct. Finances are impacting, and if nothing is clearer than that, then we just have to mention the kinds of cuts that are required by ESSER.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Ms. Bolton said a mouthful.
She did. I was like, you opened
And
up.
I think just at first glance, and people should know we're also looking at it for the first time. At first glance, I think it's good to provide this historical context. So I'm not necessarily suggesting to add that.
Okay.
Just flipping through the pages, and we also said, let's give like our current status, which includes the analysis of the audit and all that. So that's good. Yeah. I think it would be helpful to include the consensus points, which is what Ms. Bolton is identifying.
They're in there.
They're in there?
Let me go to, hold on one second. You know what, they might be, I'm sorry if they're, I thought I typed them in there, but
On page what, 8 or 9 or something?
let me see. Maybe not. Maybe they're not in there clearly. So that's my fault because I had a couple of different versions of this.
Yeah, that's all right.
But they were supposed to be in there.
Remarkable. I appreciate all the work.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be in there. So that might be on my draft 10 that I have. But we did come to consensus about certain things. And so I thought I put them in there.
Well, it's just,
yes.
We can take a look at that.
Okay.
Like I said, I haven't just looked at it. I haven't read it thoroughly, so they may be written differently than like a list of consensus points. So
well, they weren't supposed to be. So I will add the consensus topics in there, for sure. Some of, if we all turn to, because we are, the middle school was kind of something that we thought about, but let me back up. From the tentative report that one of our committee members gave, on page 9 are those items. So if we go to page 9, So I finally got to the point, I was like, okay, I'm doing all this brain dump, but let's talk about what some of the things that you had brought up, Board Member Bolton. And these are the items that, from the definitive report that you did, that you felt we needed to discuss in our ad hoc report. So these are some of the items I wanted us to go back to and address. On page 10 are items that I heard when I pulled from all of our meeting minutes that came up that we also wanted to address. So I wanted us to spend some time on page 9 talking about the things that you kind of summarized the last ad hoc facilities master plan, some of the thoughts of the new stuff, but page 9 talks about things that we need to kind of amend from the original charge. I wanted us to spend some time on that, if we could. So the first one is CAN's boundary attendance lines and dot maps. And let me just say this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we decided on the corridor model, west, central, east. We also decided that the programming, we talked about the systems that the district is made up of, Montessori, neighborhood. It was Montessori, the systems.
Yeah, Montessori, international schools, preschools.
Systems of schools.
Neighborhoods, yeah, systems of schools.
And then we also talked about having the same systems across corridors.
Right.
We talked, and again, west, central, east. We talked about within specific corridors. Jeremy gave us information about attendance boundary lines that needed to be looked at in the central, the northeast, and the central. And that specifically on the west side, we don't have capacity for a lot of things because we're jam-packed and we really need to look at the attendance lines on the west side. So all of our attendance lines, Jeremy, is that pretty much right? All of our attendance lines, our attendance boundaries need to be looked at, but particularly on the west side, it's impacting everything that we're thinking of, from middle school to neighborhood schools to the systems model as well. Is that pretty much about what you thought?
Yeah, I guess.
The west side.
Yeah.
The west side?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote down, if what I'm understanding, it is basically looking at the corridor model, and under that, looking specifically at attendance boundary lines, capacity issues, and what else?
It was the
program.
It was the programming.
Okay.
I was trying, like, systems
I
program.
think I got it.
Okay. So when we look at page 9 with Board Member Bolton's suggestions, there's the northeast side schools that we specifically looked at that needed to be looked at were John P. Parker, Silverton, Woodford as magnets, and then
PRM.
the PRM and Silverton as well. I think that's how we got to everybody being concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. But we were, so, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's it's the big picture in the, as you pointed out, in the central area. And again, this predates 2022. This goes back almost 4 years now, out of Student Achievement Committee. I think Mrs. Bates was still on the board. I know Mr. Morosky and I were in Student Achievement. So this predates, and it goes back to when indeed the district, rightfully so, tried to preserve the middle class staying in the district and invented magnets. And then also when indeed boundary lines were redrawn, and when the state basically said you're going to have a K-8 model, and we unfortunately or fortunately changed that in the almost 14 years ago, because the elementaries didn't want to have the 7th and 8th graders with them. They had enough issues facing the state testing and what have you. this has been going on for a while. It's not just since ad hoc was convened, but if you look at the North Central, the first place that got affected was with the creation of CANS. And when it became obvious that we needed an extra school in the central corridor, even before we were calling it a central corridor, and when we were dealing with the lottery system and camping out at Fairview, because the Clifton people thought that was their neighborhood school, and indeed Fairview is a district-wide magnet. And if we're going to have an equity policy, or we're going to not give special preference to people that can get off of work and tent and camp out, all those are huge, big changes that the previous boards had to deal with. So when we created CANS, by buying back, if you will, or by taking back Clifton School, which had become the arts center or something for Clifton, we had to draw boundaries. And the decision at that time was to, okay, by law, we can't start figuring out racially how to draw boundaries. Let's do something that's quite traditional in Cincinnati, which is do it in part by neighborhood boundaries. And that's how CANS even got its name, was Clifton Area Neighborhood School. So it meant Spring Grove Village, as well as Cuff, as well as Clifton. And the idea was to make it as diverse as possible, but also make sure that it was a full-blown neighborhood school. So that, when we did that, you start to look at more northern. And when you look more northern, Winton folks and College Hill folks and Mount Airy folks, and to a lesser extent, Northside folks have schools that are not necessarily drawn around their neighborhood boundaries. They're called neighborhood schools, but they aren't. The kids in, as Member Moffitt brought this up now, I think the third month you were here, I think it was in this room, and it was in policy.
Yeah,
if I recall, and I think he was sitting in Carolyn's chair in policy committee, and you said, I only can remember things by space, and the older I get, the more I depend upon where was I when this happened, frankly. And it was like the kids in Winton Terrace, Winton Hills, Finlater Gardens, the kids I went to high school with, they literally walked past their school to get on a bus to go to Pleasant Hill. And the College Hill kids, if you're west of Hamilton, you're going to Mount Airy, which is why our district kept calling the College Hill Recreation Center the Mount Airy Recreation Center. So long, making it very long, but that's how that happened. And so that the idea of maybe making neighborhood schools be neighborhood schools was part of it. And the thing that impacted the east side was, I think, the mistake we made in marketing years ago. I was not part of it, but the idea that, because I'm very much in favor of the marketing or the programming that was at Silverton and at a few other places, the Paideia system, which I taught by Paideia, actually, it unfortunately didn't market the way that others marketed. And so, more importantly, Pleasant Ridge became so overcrowded that we did decide years ago, 3 years ago or more, to build on to Pleasant Ridge. And there was the issue of what to do about the other schools in the Eastern Corridor. So that's how Silverton somehow got involved. It's how Woodford got involved and PRM got involved. So boards have been making decisions, just like on the west side, the Montessori issue. That's why we bought Mother of Mercy, was the expansion of Montessori, and that's how we got the elementary. So these things, this has not happened only as a result of ad hoc. Ad hoc has been picking up the banner, so to speak, as to how to approach it more theoretically as well as more of a big picture. So it took a long time, I'm sorry, but.
No, that's all right. Jeremy, can you tell me, one of the questions that we raised was having consistent programming across all three corridors. This is before the middle school option. We talked about that. And I know you have a map somewhere that says the programming per corridor and if there are any deficiencies currently.
So I'm not sure if we have a map that shows, depending on how you define program, because we've talked both in program and the systems of schools. So the maps we have define more around whether it's a K-6, pre-K-6, pre-K-8, Montessori, Magnet, and matches those up by corridor. The program audit itself has some tables in it in terms of what programs are available in each corridor. And I think I would have to go back and review exactly to call out the numbers, but there definitely were inequities that we found across each of the corridors when we did the audit as to what would be present in each as we've defined them today. So once we look at a corridor, you would have to look at some alignment for several of those programs, like we have talked in some of our earlier meetings around, some programs would have to be duplicated or split. Some programs would have to be, maybe a singleton in the central corridor to meet the demand across the district. But yeah, we talked, that was within the program audit, not on the maps.
It's
It was
kind
in
of
the program
school.
audit, okay.
Yeah.
But the superintendent's group did a complete program audit.
They did.
Which was very valuable to try to figure out where the inequities were.
I do believe it was linked in here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
tried to
great.
link it in there.
That's good.
Well, but I want us to decide on in the report. There's so much information, and there's 18 months of meetings. So forgive me, guys, if it's kind of crazy. I was going through it like, yeah, we did talk about this. And, oh my gosh, it was a lot. It was a lot. What do we want to put in this report? Because I've got the historical perspective, and that's 7 pages just of history. Do we want to bring people how we got here now, or do we just want to start with this is where we would like to go? I do think that there's value in understanding the historical perspective, but I don't want it to get entangled into where we need to go, because the bottom line is we can't do it the way we've been doing it for a variety of reasons, and we need to do things differently. So transportation is impacted. We've had the treasurer come and talk about staffing. What we didn't get was the report on the superintendent recommended 6 through 8. I put that in here because I found it. And we don't have a report of what that would look like. We have a potential place to house it. We talked about that, but we don't have
I call
anything
it the Jones legacy is what I call the middle school.
But we don't, but we don't have, and just to remind everyone, Jeremy, jump in, we have no school on the west side that could accommodate a middle school option.
Correct. And I would probably, even to your point earlier about the west side with the attendance boundaries and capacity, I would actually say on the west side, if you look at it holistically, you remove the attendance boundaries and you just look at either or by the number of students who are attending on the west side or by the number of students who live on the west side versus the actual capacity of just the buildings we have geographically on that side. There is not enough capacity there to fit our need in either case. So it's not just within individual attendance boundaries, it's as a whole.
That's important. Yes, ma'am. I think you said that before, Jeremy.
Probably not as cleanly.
Yes, I like that. I would say that you could, what we've been talking about regarding a middle school in the central corridor, and you can do it on the east side corridor. Unfortunately, the west corridor, to your point, has too much capacity for too few buildings. Now, we do have property on the west side, which was the old Heinold property, but a lot of the superintendent has suggested that as a place where we could build the new Dater to help alleviate some of the problem for the West High Dater campus, which is also crowded. See, one of the things we have to address is that without going to the public for any more money at this time, we have to address the fact that our high schools are, most of them, at max. And some of it's the preschool piece, and some of it is enrollment. and what have you, whereas many of our elementaries are under capacity. So the other piece that's happening quietly is the idea of less and less magnets. And indeed, over time, we've been kind of winnowing those magnets down and kind of going in the direction of neighborhood schools. So that's just something to think about. The West Side's attendance boundaries have to be redrawn, it would seem, and we probably need to find another building for elementary as we do the redrawing of the lines.
As we're talking here, in my head, when you ask what should we put in this report, I sort of jotted down what I'm thinking. And what I'm providing is a framework. I think what Ms. Bolton is providing is sort of the meat to the potatoes. So, but it should be included. So in terms of a framework, I would say, and because I believe that the full board needs to get the full scope of information. So the historical context, where are we now and how we got there? And this stuff is not in any particular order. We have to figure out the order. Transportation analysis, financial analysis, all with supported data, the consensus points, the recommendations, which should include everything that Ms. Bolton talks about, recommendations, and then maybe where the committee, and in those recommendations, maybe prioritize those based on what we're talking about here, because we have lots of recommendations, but we know that we may not get to everything.
Okay.
So in my brain, the way I operate, the framework starts, I think there's enough information in here. I mean, we talked about, developing corridors and all that, which I think is a huge recommendation, probably high priority. And the program audits, all that will fit under recommendation. So I don't know if that helps. It helps me to think about it in terms of a framework. So the content pieces, I think, are all here. We just gotta put the meat to it.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, that's how I thought about it. So that's why it's labeled like where we were, where we're going.
Yeah.
But then that was all the way up until January, and then it just got to be so much information.
It is.
I was like, whoa.
But I don't mean to cut you
No, you're
off,
fine.
but if you put it all on paper and we can see how big it is, we can then begin to narrow it down a little bit further. But I think, I happen to believe it's going to be a pretty hefty report.
I think so. I
It's
think
going
it
to
is.
be, and I think it's fair for the full board to see it.
I think
We've been
it is.
meeting since, what, last July? When did we start?
We started in May. April was when we got the charge, and we started in May
Of
of
this year?
2022.
2022. So there's lots of information.
Very,
I
very
think
much so.
We need to at least pull it all together and then decide what we want to, how we want to share it.
I agree.
And we'll help you with it.
Oh, well, we got 12 pages so far. I was like, oh my God. That's probably why I got a headache. I gave her that counter and she's been counting down everything. Yes, President.
Thank you for this. I wanted to, I think, first say thank you to Dr. Moffitt in particular for leading this committee and this work for the duration of the committee. It's a lot. I've learned a lot. I'll also share, I was trying to get brought up to speed, and there are 17 or 18 different meetings. And so I decided this would be a good time to try to learn ChatGPT. So I tried to copy and paste all of the meeting reports into ChatGPT, and it broke. So there was enough information here that even the next generation of artificial intelligence couldn't summarize and spit back to me a summary. So I thought the best thing for me to do, the reason, it's a segue to the reason why I'm here. I really appreciate Dr. Moffitt's time last week. We figured out a date for the recommendations to come on December 4th. I think that is great. I'm trying to figure out how I can be helpful in setting those recommendations up for an easy passage. And what I wanted to try to do is play back what I think I'm hearing around the direction this is headed and just check to make sure I was hearing it right. Is that okay?
I don't know if I feel like we're there yet, but you can play it back if you want to.
No, that's fine. If we're not put that back, I'll hold it because I want to keep listening.
Okay.
But I think the kinds of things I'm trying to understand are, how many recommendations are going to come forward? What's the rationale for each one? And like, what are the problems that we're trying to solve for? And I think a number of those have come up just in listening for the last 45 minutes.
Sure.
And then for whatever those recommendations are and whatever problems we're solving for, how much does it cost? And how do we think about those costs alongside other priorities in our overall budget context, which is going to be about cutting quite a bit. And it could be that there's some real opportunities for cost savings here.
So I'm just going to ask you to hold off for 1 second because those are questions I wanted to ask my committee members. Some of those questions that you're talking about. I don't want to speak. We've got some recommendations, but I do want us to kind of hone in before you summarize, if you don't mind, because we were able to get a report from Jeremy regarding transportation, but Jen was going to give us some information regarding staffing that we don't have. So we won't be able to answer. Yes. So we won't be able to answer all of those things for you, but I do want us to come up with the questions, if you don't mind. Just give me 1 second.
No, I'm here to listen, so
Okay.
that sounds great.
So to the committee members though, and to Board Member Jones' point, we've got the historical context. We will get that down. We've got the where are we now. What would you say are some of your ideas on where we are now? You've already shared some, Eve, but what additional ones do you have any, I should say?
I'm sure there's stuff I would add to the report. And,
Okay.
And look at it and not take a long time to do that. But I do think it comes down to recommendations that we're making, and to Ben's point, recommendations that I think we should agree with, and maybe that's that consensus point, but I would put them in form of recommendations and why we're recommending that.
Yes. I completely
What's
agree.
the justification for doing it? Because some of these are huge.
Mhm.
There's also this underlying feeling too that somehow this will take many, many years to do. We don't have many, many years to do this. It's as simple as that.
I think some of our recommendations had the possibility of even starting next year.
Oh, absolutely.
So we've talked about that. What were the ones that you think for the upcoming 2024-25 school year?
The very first thing I would start is where we left off when we came up with that regarding CANS. CANS has been in existence for 6 years, I think. And it was a year after CANS got started that we talked about the boundary lines in the north central area. So that's been on hold. And the fact that we, through all those discussions, agreed to not only buy Mercy so that we would have Gamble free, moving to Mercy, Gamble being freed up so we could continue to address this growth in Montessori schools and Montessori students. So I think that's part of it. And then the other, so I think those are two of the ones that are, I think, most important, but not necessarily the only ones.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a little antsy about it because I think for me, what will be helpful for me to answer your question is that I need to take a look at all the recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because I think what Ms. Bolton is saying is a smidget of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Well,
And so,
to your point, that I put that on page 9 because
Mhm.
that appeared to be a carryover from work that was previously
Previously
started
done.
that did not get completed. So, or I don't know if it didn't get completed or if it was just kind of like, let's see how it goes and then revamp it later. So that's why on page 9, it was, CANS was, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, it's 9.
That was something that was in existence pre me. So, I didn't know if you all wanted to continue to do that or what.
Yeah.
I right now, I can't tell you what I want to do or what I'm recommending.
Okay.
But I do think, like on page 9, and you all have heard, folks, even the public has heard me say this. I think we have to get away. I mean, there might be, we have to have some real broad recommendations and not identified by specific schools, although we may use that as data points or examples of what we're talking about.
Okay.
So this is not about, what we're doing is not about individual schools. It is about the big picture. So we're talking about program capacity and all those things, the big picture stuff. But then we can use the examples that I think Ms. Bolton is speaking of and what our public is telling us as sort of rationale for some of those things.
So, but to your point about big picture, are you saying rather than specifically say CAN's boundary lines, just say north-central corridor boundary lines?
It would be broader than that, I think.
Broader than CAN?
But yeah, but not every school's gonna need a look at the boundary lines, but we pretty much know what schools they are. We may use CANs as an example. I don't know if.
No, I think that's right. I think that goes with the idea that here's the broad stroke of all the things we're trying to accomplish. These may be the tactical ways to do it, and then here's maybe a timeline associated with it.
Right.
It's going to end up being specific schools somewhere along the lines. Let's be real. But even the folks that are at Silverton or PRM or Woodford or whatever, or Winton Hills, they need to know what's the bigger picture as to why you're impacting us in this way. It's not fair to say boom and boom and boom. They have to be able to see it in the bigger picture. Does Little Taft remain a magnet? What's the bigger picture? If it sounds like you're being victimized, then you got a problem. If you're part of a bigger picture, you might, we might all be able to grasp it. And I do think that whole program audit was crucial because we want equitable access for everybody, and we want to be able to afford the equitable access. Right now, we can't even afford the equitable access.
So to the point of Chase and Mount Airy and the central corridor, would you say just look at the lines in the central corridor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So 2024, 2025 school year, central corridor lines.
Definitely.
Lines need to be redrawn, right?
Yeah,
am I saying this right?
I would also say that we've come to grips based upon the data that has been presented over the last 2 years, especially, and even the year before that, the capacity piece on the west side. It's a shame that, forgive me, it's really a shame in Mary Ronan's last 2 years, we didn't redraw west side attendance boundaries. When you're an outgoing superintendent, you can get by with doing something that big. And that's especially if you're by birth a west sider, as Mrs. Ronan was, it would have been, because we have to either find a school, we have to find another school to begin with. But I would say west side boundary lines have to be drawn based upon the data that Jeremy's produced regarding capacity.
Okay. So I put down really all the corridor, really, we're talking about north, central corridor, west corridor need to be redrawn.
Silverton is basically the northeast corridor.
Yeah,
it's the
east. Yeah.
It's the north?
It's the north central.
I thought it was north central.
No,
no.
Silverton, that would be
Silverton
east.
would be east.
East.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the north.
It's the east, and you're the northern part of the east corridor. I think that's the way to describe it. I think that's the way we would be talking in terms.
I thought that's what they're saying.
I'm gonna let you ask your question for 2 minutes, and then, yes, ma'am.
I just feel like if there isn't, I totally understand with bringing a whole new corridor in place, things are going to be changed. However, I feel like if you aren't specific with naming the schools, it feels a little bit sneaky as a parent perspective. Just saying.
Well, tell me what that means, because I'm not sure if I understand. What you say.
It feels like, from my end, it feels like, oh, if PRM isn't in this discussion, we're just broad ranging it to the east corridor. As living in Kennedy Heights, but my kids go to PRM, we are always on the chopping block of getting cut off. So that's why I like to come here, just to be present in the conversation, just to hear what's going on. But I feel like if there's a let's not talk specifics, it's kind of like a let's not get parents and the community
Disingenuous.
Sorry, yeah.
I think I have to disagree a little bit. And let me clarify kind of the way I envision it. This committee is not charged with taking action. We are charged with making big picture recommendations, which is why I always say it's not about individual schools. The key piece to all of this is the community engagement piece, which has to happen last year. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I do get that we don't want to make all of these decisions without talking with the schools and the parents and all of that. But we can't, I mean, I think you guys have been great about coming, advocating for your schools, but there's a whole slew of schools that don't even have a clue what we're doing. And that's why I'm saying, let's keep it big picture, make a big picture recommendation. We can use examples, but make big picture recommendations, and the full board has to respond to it as well. So so we're not disagreeing. I think it's the timing of it. I do hear that it's really important. The community engagement piece is huge, and it's been lacking. We know that.
I was gonna say it has been lacking, and every meeting the community says they want more engagement. Everyone, and we have portrayed that to administration because that's not really our charge. So we have said that we want more engagement for you all. We can come up with a decision, but then that's their responsibility to do that. So we hear you. Yes, ma'am.
I would just say that we're spending the millions of dollars that we're spending, and the board before this one, so prior to, I believe, your arrival and Brandon's arrival and Mary's arrival, the board decided we were not changing the PRM boundaries, period. That's why there's an addition going in at PRM. And the reason not to change the PRM boundaries is that they were at capacity, and there was, you know, this situation regarding PRM that the boundary lines would stay the same. And that was an actual decision by the board that those boundary lines would not change. And so that's why there is an addition. We can argue about whether the addition's right. It goes up, it goes out, and we should have bought the golf course, or we should get the fire station next to it or something along the lines. But that decision's made. We're spending millions of dollars there. So now you know those boundary lines are going to stay the same because we just invested millions of dollars to accommodate that. So that's part of a puzzle on the east side that's taken care of, but then it falls to some of these other areas, especially the elimination of the magnet status or what have you. So.
And then our responsibility as a board, and that's great to have a historical perspective, is to, if we make the recommendation to review the boundaries, and then administration says, hey, we're thinking about moving PRM's boundaries. No, you cannot do that. So that's how that's supposed to work in theory. That makes sense.
It's not going to move. The PRM boundaries are not going to move.
No, we're not going to do that. And then justify any other boundaries that they're trying. That makes sense. So I just want to tell you how the process is supposed to work in theory. We know it doesn't always work. You got like 30 seconds. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't know if you were aware, but PRM is at capacity for
Even
the
with
addition.
the addition. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it would have been best to have the golf people or the fire station people. And the fire station people will tell you that they can't even put the fire engine in the station without it going through the floor. So yeah, they need to hand over that little corner, but they can't until they know that they've got a proper response time on that side. So it's all a puzzle. But I think, Carolyn, you were kind of saying the same thing.
I think you were too.
It's all about transparency and timing.
And I put that in there. I don't know if you can I don't know if you can see it, Rob, but I did put that in there with the specific schools a little bit down. But what other recommendations are you all thinking? I know we talked about
We'll get to look at this when we go home, right?
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. And we're going, well, we also talked about a middle school option. Yes. Which was just kind of one of my favorites. And I'll tell you, it's one of my favorites because middle schoolers are like aliens.
Nobody wants them.
Nobody wants them, but they are just horses of different colors. You know, it's like, oh my
Somebody
goodness.
approached me earlier today at school board school and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you guys are talking about schools," and I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay."
Because they are different. I remember when my own kids were in middle school, I was like, where did you come from? And my
Who
mom
are
kept
you?
saying, the aliens kidnapped them, they'll bring them back. But it was just like, wow, they're just different. So I think we may get a higher return for our kids academically, socially, emotionally, if we put them someplace separate. That's just the me. So I'm gonna say middle school options. And I put this in the report and I kind of talked about it a little bit. It was kind of all
It
over.
can work in the central and the east, but it can't necessarily work yet on the west.
If you go to page 8, Rob, Jeremy has a chart so that everyone can kind of see. I know it's a little tiny, but middle schools. Jeremy, we said it can work in the east, it can work in the central, cannot work in the west.
Correct. The east,
Say it again.
We can capacity wise, it could work in the east,
Mhm.
it could work in the central, but there is no space in the west corridor.
I would add just, that's from a capacity standpoint
Right,
purely.
only.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other factors, and I think just, and this may speaking as much for myself as much as administration, I think what makes me nervous around the middle school when we talk about it is just that, and probably not a popular part of it, but there are costs associated with it that it's going to be hard to come up with an option or a model that's not going to increase our costs at some point as we make the transition at minimum. So that part is trying to figure out how we make the transition under our current financial circumstances.
But I thought we got, thank you,
Mhm.
and I thought we got a report. Again, it didn't have everything because we didn't have the staffing numbers, but we had a transportation saving.
No, so I think there might have been a little confusion, and also with the superintendent's recommendation. Her original recommendation was to look at a few K-8s and to start
Not
there.
happening.
Then when we talked about
Do you know when that was? Because I saw she recommended.
it would have been with the program audit originally. Then when we talked about the middle schools, we looked at we looked at a couple options from 7-8, 6-7-8, 7-8-9, and 6-7-8-9.
No, that's gonna
And
happen.
that's where the recommendation came from, that within the middle schools,
Good.
the recommendation would be 6-7-8.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that,
I got the note.
Yeah.
It was in May or the June meeting that I put down that the superintendent recommended I'm sorry, 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
But I don't have any other data around the administration
Love you.
doing an analysis
Almost.
on staffing.
no,
Because
the staffing is the part that was still missing. I believe the treasurer's office is working on it. But we looked at the transportation, and in that same meeting, and there would be a transportation cost, not a savings, based on different ways that you could look at it and how we added it up. The most part of it comes from when you look at the separation of the fleet, right? Currently, and that's assuming everything else stays the same, that we don't change policies along with it. So if you look at the 7th and 8th grade who are taking yellow bus, and then the K-6 have yellow bus, and then the high school 9 through 12 have Metro. Then, and of course, the 7 and 8 is split in that reality. So by having a middle school, the 7th and 8th grade would have a separate set of bus needs from the K-6 for yellow, and whoever, we would have to go to all yellow, no Metro. And then the high school would stay as Metro. So by having a second set of yellow bus needs to go to another school at the middle schools, as opposed to, I know the unpopular K-8 option, like without that option. Right.
So we weren't
did
doing
that already.
We weren't doing a K-8.
Right.
It was always, the discussion was always the middle school option. And then we segued into neighborhood, like if the kids went to a middle school in their corridor, transportation costs in theory shouldn't have been a lot higher because they're in their corridor. So they're not crossing corridors like they're doing now.
If we were to limit it only to the corridor, it minimizes the increase, but you still are adding a loss of optimization because the students would not be on a bus with any other students going somewhere else. You're going to have a bus route going to that middle school for those middle school students that's not carrying any other students. in effect, no matter how you split it.
Sure, but
So there is going to be an
but the
increase.
distance wouldn't be as great.
Correct.
Or,
If
and
you-
it couldn't, it might potentially not be as many.
If
I saw a
you
comment,
reduce
I'm
the, if
sorry.
you change the policies around it to reduce the number, the distance, it could minimize the cost.
That's what that was gonna be my question. Does that save cost?
It reduces the cost, it reduces the increase.
They could be. That's what I was thinking. It didn't mathematically make, when I heard the report, I thought it made sense from a transportation standpoint. We were waiting on the staffing because some staff is licensed K through 6, some staff is licensed K through 8, et cetera. But I thought there was a transportation savings. Go ahead.
The transportation savings that I recollect was just even the changing of the neighborhood boundaries in the North Central. Jeremy presented a few $100,000 of savings of transporting. You might look at the old of Winton Hills versus Pleasant Hill. It was like $300,000 we saved just to move the kids from Winton Hills back into the neighborhood that they want to go to. The problem there is we have to maybe align with the Recreation Commission or something to better use the rec center that's out there with an ice skating rink and a swimming pool and whatever, and classrooms. So I think that's where the savings were. And I think when we first talked about the middle schools, the first thing was that the superintendent chose like the 3 least capacity schools, and they all ended up to be kind of in the central lower corridor. She chose where we had the least enrollment, and she was going to make those into middle schools.
I believe it was South Avondale.
Yeah.
Well, she was looking at K8.
Yes, or
South
something
Avondale,
she was
Frederick
looking
Douglass,
at.
and
I thought it was
something
even middle schools at the very beginning. And then we said, well, we don't want to just concentrate the middle schools in one place. And it sort of was one place, but, and I've heard her kept saying about K8, we were forced to do K8 with the facilities master plan, and we had to end that. We ended that within 4 years of having them because the elementary people said, please don't have us have these 7th and 8th graders while we're trying to get through this state report card. Because it's dragging, and so that's why we had to move to the 7-12 high school. Of course, now the high schools say, please get rid of these 7th and 8th graders because it's killing us. So the K-8 option is no, but we have to say though, Madam Chair, we have to tell people that not all of our high schools are going to be 9-12. We still believe in some of our schools being K-12. We still believe in some of our schools being PK-8. It's not like there's going to be everything changes, but there will be, in the name of equity, in each of the corridors, we can do this. We can do this and make sense. And maybe have somebody told me, I don't know, Carol, I think the 3 of us were at the same place today, that somebody came up and said that if they had heard about middle school or something, and they said they thought that would be a game changer. Just of where the children are intellectually and emotionally. And it's always been the case, but more so post-COVID. That plus, I'll tell you this, no parent wants to choose their high school in the middle part of the 6th grade. And they get worried about sending their babies to a high school that early. They don't want to do that.
Are we talking about middle school being 6th, 7th, and 8th graders? What are we talking about? Y'all threw so many numbers out there.
That's what the superintendent has said, right? 6, 7, and 8.
Yes, that was what we've discussed.
Yeah.
We threw the recommendation out. I think originally the superintendent suggested K through 8.
You're still talking about that.
But we've already had that model, and that's not what we're suggesting. So we landed on middle schools being a true middle school, 6, 7, 8, not a junior high, which would be 7, 8.
Oh, I
It would
know.
be a 6, 7, 8. We talked about if there is capacity at the east, on the east side, we talked about South Avondale, right? Or
Well, the South Avondale and Rockdale, you
South
can make
Avondale.
one be primary and the other one could be kind of middle. That's because both of those buildings are under capacity. There are fewer children living in the Avondale neighborhood than when we had the facilities master plan, by the thousands. I mean, That's the thing we have to grasp.
That was Central Corridor.
Central, okay.
In Central Corridor, you probably would have to get rid of one of them. You might have to get rid of like College of Fundamental.
And then, wait,
Probably would.
well, I thought we just said South Avondale and Rockville.
That probably starts to be kind of in middle. I mean, we're classifying them as central, but they could also kind of, they're not our eastern corridor, but people probably perceive them as being eastern corridor.
Yeah, we defined them as central, and what we talked about was for
That's
central.
right, you're right.
In the modeling that we looked at, the other model we looked at for the east side was around the Bramble, J.P. Parker,
Yeah, that was,
Woodford, and Schroeder.
And that's
was
east?
that was east.
that's the east. You're right.
It's just a model
You're right.
build out to look.
Wait
at.
a minute, hold on, let me, my head started hurting. So this is what we looked at and we talked about. We did not decide, nor
No,
did
there's
we.
no decision.
We just threw it out there and the dam has broken. So I'm just saying,
Yeah.
this is just what we're talking about. And it was only based on capacity, right?
Whose is this?
It's mine. It's only based on capacity.
Live
So I
Kroger's
just wanted
or
to put that
something.
down.
Who are you making that recommendation?
The board,
The board.
The board.
full board.
I have a comment about that.
Wait a minute, hold on 1 second. I just want to clarify so I can get this down. Jeremy, I said Central, South Avondale, Rockville, East,
Bramble, J.P. Parker, Woodford, and Schroeder.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Because Schroeder's over there.
I'm struggling, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but I have to see all this on
Yeah,
paper.
me too.
Because Ms. Bolton has all this worked out. She knows exactly what she wants or how she sees it. I shouldn't say it that way, but she knows exactly how she sees it. I see it slightly differently, although I agree with some of the things that are being said. And the basis of the report should be pretty broad scope recommendations.
Yes.
And then we have to get it to the superintendent with supported data and information or examples. But it may not be, and then it would be up to administration to really look at what makes sense, what's feasible, what's not, what's doable. And I hear us saying, we got some concrete recommendations. We want this school to look like this or this. I'm not there yet. I'm not there with those kind of
Well,
recommendations.
that's fair. I don't think that's, I don't think that's, we have some concrete recommendations. I took that as the community has some concrete recommendations, in part because this committee is built upon by the administration. So the administration is making these same, is involved intimately and will be in the report. The community is involved. And so this is not just us telling the administration, this is the engagement with the community also saying.
But Kareem, I have to say, we are part of the community. We have several schools here. We're not talking about, I'm saying we can use their input as examples of what we're talking about, but the recommendation has to be pretty broad scope.
I agree with you, but there's been a survey done, which we don't even have, we're not even privy to. And so I would assume that the administration has done some due diligence in listening to this community that comes regularly, but then also they've done a survey. So it would be prudent for us to get the results of the survey too, so that we could form our recommendation. But that's the part that the administration is doing to engage the community holistically.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, they got a survey about Madisonville. We don't have that information. But all we have. Well,
I know, I heard confidence. Everybody didn't get it, so I know you didn't get it.
Well, I'm just saying that we can't, I do believe wholeheartedly this is the work of the administration, but I do think that there should be there's no harm in putting down what a recommendation would be with specifics. It doesn't tie them into doing
The
it.
recommendations can't be specific. I'm scared, I'm afraid that that it becomes so totally unrealistic because we might have 50 recommendations on there. And when I look at the consensus points, for example, there are lots of things that can be combined. Lots of the information can be combined because I'm looking at some of the big picture stuff. We're talking about capacity issues or where boundary lines should be drawn or program access or based on the audits in middle school. I think those are all great recommendations. But when we say specifically, well, the boundary lines at this particular school need to be drawn or whatever, I think we're getting into a level of detail that may not, for me, I can't grapple with that right now because it doesn't represent the big picture. It represents a piece. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm gonna argue that point if I could, real
Yes,
quickly.
ma'am.
The big picture is making a commitment to the concept of neighborhood attendance boundaries. That's the big picture. Because if we look at our neighborhood schools, even in neighborhoods that are highly integrated, our public schools aren't.
And I agree
That's a problem.
I agree with that statement.
So what is the reason? Because people board with great intentions, operating under other federal rules, regulations, and intent, did lines that many of which, not all of them, like Chase School, it looks pretty much like the north side boundaries. Oh, I mean, down to a street almost. But the crazy stuff is, whatever we tried to do, we were supposed to make the magnets look like the district, and the neighborhood schools were supposed to look like the neighborhoods. Well, that didn't happen. And so I think, to Carolyn's point, my broad picture is neighborhoods somehow make sense, and we got away from doing that. And where it's most classically represented is right there in that north central. And where we drew neighborhood boundary lines as part of the attendance boundaries for cans, we need to put an addition to that school because it's growing and those kids are walking and busing and whatever. So I think you're right about, we can't be too specific.
I like your comment about the commitments to neighborhood attendance boundaries.
That's the big picture.
That is the big picture. And I think the board's responsibility is, I saw it somewhere, it was to do attendance. It was to do boundary lines. But I'm gonna find that.
That's our role.
Yeah, I mean, that's
By
the
law.
responsibility. We can
Policy.
charge administration with doing the work, but I think that the direction has come from the board. I think that actually is part of the
When
responsibility.
did you say you was gonna try to have this finished?
It will be finished before December.
Yeah.
7 years.
Promise. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I put down capacity is in the central, for middle schools, capacity is in the central. And I put in parentheses, South Avondale, Rockdale, which are under capacity. For the east, Bramble, JPP, Woodford, Silverton, and central corridors. For the, that's, wait a minute.
Eastern,
Central
that's
corridor.
east.
That's east. The Bramble one, that's
East.
Okay. And then, but there is no capacity in the west.
There is none.
Now, and then I put down a recommendation of the committee is grades 6 through 8 for the middle school. Right?
That was the superintendent's recommendation, 6, 7, 8.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
I personally like 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
I just want to let you all know that we have to have this report done by 65 days, 7 hours, 30 minutes.
But who's counting?
I regret giving her that counter, but I was so tired of her saying, well, I'm transitioning out. I'm like, that sounds like death. No. Okay. What about programming?
Equitable, sustainable access.
For the middle school or just across the?
Well, that's what the big picture for what we're doing, so that within each of the 3 corridors, you not only have equitable programming and staffing, but you also have something that you can financially sustain. We can't sustain the way our programming is now.
We talked about impacting schools of choice. We've talked about that. I kind of want to put that down here because that's how we got to the high school conversation, is schools of choice and impacting our transportation by the neighborhood school model, and not schools of choice?
Well, high schools of choice, first of all, part of the issue of that, the financial piece, is reduced if we get rid of 7th and 8th grade from the high schools.
What do you mean?
Well, what transporting kids, let's see. The idea that you can live anywhere and go to any high school, which is part of our mantra, that's costly. Okay? And so, but if the 7th and 8th graders aren't going to high schools, they're instead going to, in some of our corridors or whatever, to middle schools, where the high school of choice is less costly for us because those 7th and 8th graders aren't showing up at living in the east and going west, or vice versa. And we know they go everywhere. These high schoolers are going everywhere. So, I mean, to me, that's less cost. That the cost problem of high schools of choice is lessened if we remove 7th and 8th graders.
So would that be based on the assumption that there would be middle schools at the neighborhood level?
In each corridor.
Not just one per corridor?
Be as many as we could have. But right now, we're having trouble coming up with, one on the west, but one on the east, but yeah.
So, and I think it's,
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I think it's important for us to include in the framework of this report our basic assumption. Because that's a basic assumption, what you just said. I can't repeat it because I've forgotten it already, but I heard what you said. So there are some underlying assumptions, and a lot of it is what I think I hear Ms. Bolton saying about, that represents our values and beliefs and things like that. I think it's important that we put it in writing so people can see. And then I also wanted to say, as Ms. Bolton was talking about impacting, or somebody, schools of choice, a big picture topic or idea is the reconfiguration of systems of schools. And the middle school concept is one part of that, and magnet programs are part of that. And so I'm just trying to, for me, put it in some context that we, in the framework of the report, that we're including the things that I just see these as important elements and ideas.
I agree with you. I do definitely agree with you. I think I put in here, under middle school, I put neighborhood versus one per corridor because we didn't decide on that. So we didn't specify this is an assumption of neighborhoods or this is an assumption of one per corridor. I just put it in there, to your point, both ways, because the impetus is to save money. So if the administration wants to say, hey, it's cheaper one per corridor than it is neighborhood, then they can decide on that. Or it's cheaper neighborhood than it is.
We're all going to have to decide, but the other thing we haven't mentioned yet, too, is that we are, as they mentioned on the screen, we are turning people away that want Montessori.
So that's
so there's a system of high schools. There's a Montessori system. I mean, we needed a third Montessori high school 3 years ago. Period, over and done with. And so we have to find a way to do that, even within the existing property that we have. Because we'd have to, and that's, I'm not a Montessorian. I don't even believe in it.
I'm a Montessori mom, so watch yourself on that one. Watch it now. Get a little shaky.
But I'm happy to support them because they work, apparently. Most diverse schools we have. So it's there. I stand corrected, but yeah, we probably even need another elementary, and maybe that's part of the configuration on the west side. I mean,
for me, it's Montessori is valued by this community, but for me, it is the equity and the access.
That's true.
which for me has different implications, and it's around policy. You know, the magnet lottery and all of that, and who gets in and that kind of.
And that's actually something, since you said that, I think I put that on there, but you guys might not see how I outlined it. That was something that the superintendent brought up during one of the meetings, needing clarification from the committee around the policies. It says on page 10, review of policies that impact attendance boundaries currently. Any potential changes needed, magnet school process review. So the request was from administration, hey, when we're talking about equitable and sustainable programming across the district, and I put down Montessori education, needing a Montessori on the east side, what?
Central corridor.
On the central. What are we saying about the magnet process?
We're reducing the magnet process as we go.
Magnets served their time, actually, 30 years ago.
I think that's part of what we're talking about when we say reconfiguring systems of schools. We, you know, do we want to call them magnet programs? Because it has a certain connotation to it, which kind of gives the message that they're superior to neighborhood schools, and that's what the community believes, because that's what we've been pushing.
Community
so it
thinks
has
of it.
policy implications, and we need to address that. So that would be
intention. I'm sure going to be my task was that was the intention of calling you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this has been a robust conversation, and I just realized that it is 5:28 and we have a 5:30 stop.
Yes, go home.
So we are going to have to meet again, ladies. Don't all get excited. Stop jumping up and down.
I can't wait.
But I do have, and I want to let President Lindy kind of summarize or ask his questions or make his statement. But we will get this a lot more organized. I kind of just did a brain dump, and I apologize. I don't want it to be on board docs that you guys see how I think, but I kind of got everything down. It's all over the place, but it will be better within the next few weeks for sure. So we'll set another date. Does that have to be a committee date, a committee meeting, public? Okay, so it'll be public. That meeting will not be a commentary meeting though. Just like, you know, it'll be like today, we might maybe have 10 minutes in the beginning, but we're gonna get this work done, just so you guys know.
Appreciate that, 'cause I want it done.
I want it done too. She makes me feel like she got the belt out.
Yeah, like she is a very bad influence.
If we had a chance to work on the document before we come to the
Yes,
meeting,
yes.
and we put all our things in the document, all our comments and stuff, so
That's a good idea.
I did think that too.
pressure on you.
No. It was pressure to get to this point because I've been
great.
trying to fit it in, but everyone now has access to it. So you can edit it on
Oh, you want
here.
us to use what's in?
Yes,
Okay,
I want you
that's
to
fine.
edit it.
Build into it or.
Yep, take it out, tell me,
I
cross
think
it
that's
out.
good. That helps
So
me.
I don't want it.
No, you
That's
don't
a
have
good-
access to it yet. See, I said, she got the grandma feels over there.
See?
I feel like I'm about to get a
I'm
spanking.
telling you, it's a bad influence.
But, the committee members,
I like
Board Member
gratitude.
Bolton, Board Member Jones, Ms. Davis, Bruckner, access to it. And so what they're going to do, I did put some links in here. So whatever I referenced, if you do move some things, just copy the link because I linked it to the board minute, to the actual document. We're going to, after everything gets done, we're going to link it to board docs so that it actually is not going to my drive, it's going to board docs, and then you all have access to it. So, want to set another meeting date?
Sure.
Just look at your calendars while President Lindy talks and summarizes, and then we'll find another date. We are out of town. I think the three of us are out of town for the Capitol Conference.
What, 11?
Uh,
Around the 11?
Yes, it is that. So, just know that maybe we can have a meeting the week after.
Now, what's the date?
We don't have it yet.
Oh,
We're
okay.
gonna let President Lindy summarize, and then, I think there may be somebody that wants to speak, Ms. Elkins Brown, maybe like 2 minutes, two minutes, and maybe like 1.5. Hold on. Not yet, not yet.
Karima, I think I'm in good shape, to be honest. I'm grateful for the chance to be here. I appreciate the work everybody's doing. I think what I'm eager to see is exactly what you all are working on, which is what are the recommendations? What's the rationale for each? Has there been some thought about cost? And then we can work through that as a board. So,
Gotcha.
thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have one more speaker person. Ms. Elkins Brown, get ready. You're almost there. You're going to be our last speaker, but Ms. Garland wants to speak.
Hello, I promised you 3 minutes, but I'll make it even quicker.
Thank you.
I did email this data. We had started speaking on these pieces at the board meeting, but of course, due to time, we weren't able to share the full scope of the data. But all this data is in your emails as well, and I have hard copies if you'd like it. I specifically spoke to the inequitable marketing in regards to Bramble and John P. Parker, specifically on social media, Facebook. During a July community engagement meeting, 3 of our teachers specifically asked what was being done to promote John P. Parker Preschool and our enrollment. At that meeting, the reply was given that we aren't marketing one school more than another. So I took the liberty of going through every post that the district has shared since June the 1st on Facebook, and I've broken it down by school, and you can see, thank you, sorry. Can you pass these down? I just want you guys to have a hard copy in front of you. This is specifically to compare, those can just go straight down to those members. Yes, please, so they have them to look at the moment. Now, this data does not include the Meet Your Principal posts or the Resource Coordinator Appreciation posts. So some of this data could be affected, but it does not change the data for John P. Parker. John P. Parker has also received derogatory and false mentions from the district or its board members. For example, in the ad hoc meeting that was recorded in September, Board Member Bolton shockingly stated that Caucasians don't feel welcome at John P. Parker. And I'm wondering how would someone that hasn't even stepped foot in our building in the last 6 years that I've been teaching at that building, excluding the one day that the superintendent came for her welcome to the district event, would know anything about the community that we're actually serving. John P. Parker prides itself on accepting every student that walks through our doors, as you've heard from several of our parents on Monday nights. But I would really like to move to how I accidentally misspoke on Monday during the public comment sections in regards to the post for Bramble. And whether it was promoting community engagement or enrollment, I had said that there were 12. However, when I went back through the data, there's actually 23 posts supporting Bramble, 7 of which specifically geared towards enrollment, and there have been zero posts for enrollment, engagement, anything for John P. Parker. So, you know, as it's just hard because the claims that you aren't marketing for one school more than the other is completely erroneous when we're not at capacity. And we were told in the July meeting that there would be 4 classrooms at Bramble to serve 80 students because there's such a need on the east side. But currently, as of yesterday, there's 25 preschool students enrolled. You have 3 teachers at that building, 2 of which only have students. You have a 3rd teacher on payroll that doesn't even have a classroom. And John P. Parker could have facilitated those students, gladly welcome them into our family. So, yeah, I'm just confused. If there's 250 plus students that were on a waiting list, why weren't those 80 seats filled? But as you can see, yeah, there's been inadequate. And we've also asked for the community meetings to be held at John P. Parker as well, so that could be equitable and accessible for our families to attend. In regards to the survey, I say it's invalid because you can go on that survey and take it as many times as you want and select whatever category you would like to share your information as. I could personally attach to 4 different ones. Previously attended with a student, a current enrollment, a CPS staff member. There's like 4 different ones. How are you tracking?
I got you.
Validity.
I got you.
And duplicate.
But you sent us an email.
I
right?
did. It's
okay.
in your email.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I went over 3 minutes. I didn't mean to be a liar.
The only other person that's going to speak is Ms. Elkins Brown. Ms. Elkins Brown, you have not accepted the invite. You have like 10 seconds to do so. You what?
In lieu of ED? I'll be good.
It would be one or the other because we are about to go. So did she accept it yet? Okay. You can take her 2 minutes, but when this goes off, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You got
I
two.
just want to say that Teresa here is proof that parents will come to John P. Parker if they know what great things are happening at John P. Parker. Teresa also lives in Hyde Park. That's correct, right? Oakley, Hyde Park, which is kind of the market for Bramble. So, I mean, that's our point, is that we are under-enrolled, but we are a wonderful school. We have 5 stars, 4 stars. We're going for 5 this year. We have 4 stars. The only other schools that have 4 stars are Covedale, Fairview, Hyde Park, Kilgore, and Sands. We have the lowest enrollment, yes, and the lowest attendance, but we also have the lowest per pupil spending, which we feel is another DEI issue. We have schools such as Fairview, Hyde Park, Kilgore, 16,000, Fairview 16,000 plus, Hyde Park is 22,000 plus. We're only 13,000 per pupil spending. We have the highest percentage of African American students. We have the 100% free and reduced lunch. We have the highest special ed also.
Gotcha.
So we just, I mean, even with those things
yes
going on, we have we still exceeded state standards. And if you look at Schroeder right now is listed at 710 students, 81% attendance or 82% attendance. That's 582 kids per day average.
I'm gonna have to cut you. I'm gonna have to cut you off.
That my bell did go off.
I know it didn't go off, but
Can
I
you
gave
hear
you.
me?
Ms. Elkins Brown, we have got to go. But
Okay.
there you go. So, Ms. Elkins Brown, Ms. Elkins
Can
Brown.
you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. But I cannot let you
Okay.
speak because we have got to go.
Okay, I just want to say,
Okay, 2 minutes, Ms. Brown. Go ahead. 2 minutes. 'Cause I'm- Go ahead.
Bramble could have been 7th and 8th grade, and it could have been one of the rising stars. And plus, we have parents that have complained about the survey because it was misleading. And we do want to keep our school pre-K through 6, and we are a 4-star school, and we are excellent. And if you came to visit our school, you could see the work that we do. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to conclude our meeting. I want to say to you all, I have not seen a survey that you're talking about. So I apologize. I don't know. Sure. So I just wanted you to know, I do not know. I do not know what you are speaking about. Board Member Bolton?
Yeah.
Ladies?
At a a board meeting 4 or so meetings ago, the
Yeah,
superintendent,
because I reviewed it here last time too.
yes, and we
What, we had
reviewed
the
it
survey?
here, where the survey was reviewed.
Oh, I
and
might have missed it.
What they're concerned about is that survey may not have had the results that they may have wanted.
Oh, okay.
No,
And
that's
so-
not our concern at all. Our concern is that it was written in a way that was leading parents to believe that the only options they had were K-2 or K-3 at Bramble and 4 to 8 or, I forget the other option, at John P. Parker, because those were the only ones listed.
Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. Those were the only options listed. Our parents didn't even understand that the Bramble survey had anything to do with them because they felt that they were parents or family members of John P. Parker students. So they still do not have clarity that whatever happens at Bramble is going to affect John P. Parker. They still don't understand that. And the way it was written is saying that these are your only options unless you pick other. And we know that people aren't really, you know, going to.
So I'm
go to
gonna,
that
I'm gonna
other.
get the survey sent to the
It's not
committee.
survey.
It is definitely,
There's a new one?
There's a,
Yeah.
you showed me.
we want to do what's best for
Madisonville, you said.
our
Oh,
parents.
this
Yes. Yeah, is that the
That's
survey
Yeah.
that you're
new.
talking about?
It's only the promotion for it that's new. It's not the survey of it on Facebook and the wording. The only thing that changed.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to call our meeting, is adjourned. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, so we're adjourned at 5:42. Good night.